Welcome to the Wisconsin Wellness Podcast. I'm Lori Groh, your host, mental health therapist, and practice owner. Each month, we'll showcase a central theme and provide weekly practical hacks, inspiring interviews, and valuable advice from wellness professionals. Our aim is to help you streamline your wellness and mental health journey. So let's start the show. Hi, welcome to the Wisconsin Wellness Podcast. Today we have Emmett Kilduff with us, who is a former investment banker. He experienced a life-altering moment after a heart procedure that shifted his focus from career success to living a life of purpose. Realizing he had a limited time left to make a meaningful impact, he created a life optimization framework, Pitstop, built on the pillars of content, chat, and change, designed to empower men to live fully and improve their well-being. Now living in Ireland with his family, Emmett is dedicated to helping others lead enriched lives, self-development, and intentional change. So thank you for being here, Emmett. So I'm a therapist, and one of the things I like most about my job is actually working with men. I have 3 brothers. And so I feel like I had an insight into men's world up until right now. And now I have 3 boys and a daughter, and I get to see it all again in just a slightly different way. So I'm really excited to talk with you about your work. But first, I'd like you to share, if it's okay with our listeners, a bit of your story on how you made that transition, because you had very successful businesses and then you transformed a bit and pivoted in this new direction. So I want to hear a little bit about that.
Out of college, I went to join the world of investment banking, working in London, initially with Credit Suisse and latterly with Morgan Stanley, one of the top US investment banks. I left Morgan Stanley in 2012 to start a number of businesses, serious, formal businesses. But it was this healthcare that you referenced that sort of was a catalyst for me to create a really mission-driven or purpose-driven business, which is Pitstop. I've done a few different types of jobs, a ruthless investment banking, deal-making type job, and the really fun, purpose, mission-driven, massive task-orientated business to Pitstop, which is where we genuinely want to try and help men become better men through growth mindset and personal growth. That can help society in totality. It's not a zero-sum game just helping men. And frankly, there are loads of apps helping women, but very few helping men. And you've probably seen that there's a term called femtech. Femtech is a term, female technology companies. The equivalent term for men doesn't exist yet, whether it's male tech or men tech or whatever the right phrase might be. The term doesn't exist, let alone there's only a handful of startups. So excited to move from a ruthless investment banking role to a purpose-driven role.
Yes. When you say that really professional, serious business, I'm like, oh, get me out of there as soon as possible. But it's also so interesting because we're more than just one thing. And I'm kind of in that opposite space of started very much in mission of helping people as a therapist, and then moving into more of what can I do business-wise. So it's a very different, almost backwards approach. But I always wish if I could go back in time that I would have more education in that world. I don't know if I could be in a situation where I'm cutthroat or anything like that, but I would imagine some of that transfers over really nicely in this world as well, because you have to make some really hard decisions, I would imagine. But anyways, if you could walk through a bit of what that experience was like, because I do know that there's a lot of men that I talk to and a lot of listeners that really at some point in their life realize what they've been told and what they thought was the most valuable turned out not to be the case. And so was that similar for you when you had your procedure, when you had the heart issue?
It's sort of frustrating that it took a health scare to shake me and be the catalyst for me to sort of wake up and smell the coffee, smell the roses, and really try and focus on balance and getting the priorities right and focus on personal growth. Looking back, I was 45 when it happened. Frustrated that my school, my college, working for great companies like Morgan Stanley, I received little, if any, guidance on well-being. And I left the world of investment banking 12 years ago. I'm sure it's changed somewhat since then, but I think there's a lot more things that employers, government, and various pillars of society can do to help people. And so when I woke up in a cardiovascular ward after a procedure, and the average age of the men next to me were in their 70s. I was 45. I was in pretty good shape. Most of the other gents weren't. And I was like, I shouldn't be here. Like, something's got to change. And then I came across sort of apologies, it's like a morbid sounding book, but it was pretty important in my journey. A book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying by a palliative care nurse in Australia. He had interviewed hundreds of people on their deathbeds and summarized the top 5 regrets of all the people she'd interviewed.
Yeah.
Yes, you've been told some of those things by your parents or your grandparents, like you should enjoy every moment and you shouldn't work too hard or get your priorities. But to your question, yeah, it probably took this health scare for me to go, crikey, yeah, like, what's in that book is absolute gold dust.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be rolled forward 30, 40 years if I'm lucky to get there. I don't want to be on my deathbed and go, I have the same regrets.
Right.
Because I've learned what the regrets are of most human beings. And so what can I do to sort of really focus, take a back step? We call that take a pit stop. Take some time out to actually think about your life and think about where you want to go instead of just getting on the underway or getting on the subway or getting into your car and going to work and not really thinking about things.
Yeah. It's interesting because I feel like your work is directed towards men, but women are experiencing a very similar thing around the age of 40. In fact, that's a conversation I'm having over and over again of a similar thing, a pit stop of what do we really want our lives to look like and how do we get the most out of it and how do we live it versus just keep on doing what the next thing is, which is in itself a difficult thing to uncover and decide and think about. So I do like that idea though of pausing, right? Because if you're in motion, thinking is not necessarily what's happening. You're just automatically doing all of the things that you were doing the day before. And so it has to be something intentional, whether it's something physically dramatic or something traumatic, or it could be a shift in a relationship. It could be just a feeling someone has when they're getting ready for work of, oh my God, what am I doing every day? So it can be little things, but a lot of times it is bigger things because we need something big in order for us to change. Otherwise, we feel like, why not just keep going in this direction? So I want to hear a little bit too with Pitstop on some of the things that you offer, some of the things that you do as far as your work. It sounded like a podcast is coming out.
Podcast is live. Yes, it's called Drive to Thrive, which is a play on the Formula One program on Netflix, which you may have seen, which is called Drive to Survive. We don't want men to survive. We want them to thrive. There's lots of Formula One or NASCAR racing connotations that you'll hear from the Pitstop team.
When you're working with men, do you find that there is a common theme? Is it like you were talking about with the fact that there might be just almost I wouldn't say denial, but it almost seems as though there's maybe not that awareness of something missing.
We're trying to help. We want Pitstop to be the fuel for men's personal growth. We want to fuel men who have a growth mindset. So that's quite a broad statement, which means we're trying to help men at a holistic level. What are some of the common threads or issues we see with men? Number one is like most men live with a masks on approach. Women, I'm sure, Laurie, you've seen this, like are so much more open to discussions of any topics, whether it's sensitive or not sensitive. Men have a stigma with opening up and being vulnerable. That's an issue. And unfortunately, the extreme end of that issue, it can lead to suicide because if you don't talk to anyone about your issues, that can bottle up inside and lead to terrible things. But so that's one issue that we're trying to solve. And to your question, we have recently launched a forum within the app to help create dialogue and get the conversation started. And users can either be anonymous and stay anonymous, or they can be attributed. So I'm attributed because I'm trying to encourage masks off, be vulnerable and just be a normal guy giving comments or asking questions. That's a huge area for us to conquer. In terms of what we offer, we call it the 4 C's. It's content, community, coaches, and clinic. So content is all about education. If you understand the why of something, you're much more likely to maybe form a habit. cold water therapy, there's loads of benefits to jumping into cold water. But if you actually understand the why, it's so much easier when you do.
Right.
Your brain goes, okay, I know the benefits instead of just jumping in. And there's a few tricks to actually making it easier to do. So that's one just very simple example. We summarize the best books and podcasts to educate men. The second is community. I touched on forum. We want to create dialogue and conversation. And we're thinking about how to do that offline as well, maybe with retreats. The third is coaches. I think there's a huge opportunity to connect men with people like you. I'm very happy to say I have a therapist. I don't think that's a sign of vulnerability. I think it's a sign of strength, frankly. But where do you go to find a therapist that suits you? Really tricky, really difficult. Suits your personality. How do you pay them? How can you see their meeting notes in the last 12 months? Can AI help? There's a huge opportunity there, I think, to help men. And it's connecting people with coaches like therapists, qualified therapists, but also executive coaches, nutritionists, gym coaches. So that's really fun, and we'll bridge the offline online world. That's coming next year. And then finally, it's clinic, the 4C. The healthcare system is messed up. People are taking tablets to cure something in a reactive basis when actually we should be preventative. I have a longevity doctor as an example, and he's up and you think what I can do to lengthen my health span, which is very different to lifespan. So there are the 4Cs. We haven't by any means conquered all of those Cs yet. We're still at an early stage startup, but we're excited to get going on our journey.
Yeah, I love it. I love it because when we look at issues, especially when there's an issue, it can seem as though it's maybe one thing impacting it or two, maybe three. But the reality is that there's probably so many things that are all impacting and keeping that problem there or that issue there. And so we can look at it by here, take this pill or here, take a supplement or things like that. But really what it comes down to is looking at that whole person. None of us are isolated. None of us are just ourselves without any impact from other people or things or environments or ideas. But we sometimes want to solve problems that way. The reality is all of those things do impact us as far as our well-being. I love too that mission of helping men open up more and connect more and reducing that stigma that occurs with men and sharing and talking. And that is one thing for sure that I think women, we take for granted in that way, where a lot of our relationships and friendships, we know so much intimate details about each other, so much that it makes me sad a bit that that experience isn't as available for men.
It's definitely not. And when men meet up, someone asks a man, how are you? Generally, like in Ireland, the person would say, I'm grand. Or you'd say, I'm okay, I'm great. But you can't be that every day. But it's the same answer every day for most people.
Right.
And then you go and you watch a football game or a basketball game and you have a few beers and you don't really, it's all a little bit superficial and fun, but it's not actually, I don't think we know, maybe men don't know their male friends as well as women know their female friends. I would agree with that. Mm-hmm. I have 3 kids, 2 boys, aged 16 and 10, and my 16-year-old boy has heard of Andrew Tate, and some of his friends follow Andrew Tate, and that disgusts me. And is the last person I want my or any boy around the world, frankly, to be listening to. And I think there's a lot of boys who feel lost. Girls, in fairness, are getting better grades, school, college, are getting better jobs, and there's stats that I could show you stats to prove all that. And I think some men are feeling a bit lost as what's their purpose.
Yeah.
In the old days, men were the breadwinner, but that's absolutely changed, and rightly so. I'm not saying it's not the way it should be going, but it's there's no one really supporting them or telling them or guiding them.
Right.
And that's not fair. And no doubt lots of schools have wellness being programs and are trying, but I think society needs to do more and we all need to do more.
Yeah.
And again, I wish I was taught some of these things when I was a teenager. Now, if we can form the habits of these soon-to-be men early, then it'll be more second nature to them, because I'm 47. It gets harder and harder to change, although there are tricks to change as well. It can be done if you do it the right way, but it'd be great to help more teenagers.
Yeah. And that idea of being lost, I think that it is what's happening a bit. And the place where I live is very different than the place I work. So I live in more of a rural area. And so masculinity tends to be a bit more like, you need to be this way. And it's very narrow. And so some of the conversations I'm having are surprising me because in my work and the people I'm around in my day-to-day, it's very different where we openly talk about it's okay to cry. And in these conversations, I'm hearing, oh yeah, men can't. And the world too is, maybe I'm being too broad, but there is a shift in what those expectations are for men. And they weren't taught anything about those new expectations, I don't think, in a pretty general sense. Like I was talking to some of my male friends about that, where you're expected now to be in a space of, right, like being more emotional, being more connective. All of those things are expected now a bit more, be more hands-on with parenting. But you didn't grow up that way. So where did you learn all of that? And so it's like asking somebody to play cards without a full deck. And not in a rude way, but in that wasn't part of what was taught. There was no handbook.
How are you supposed to be good at something if you haven't trained to be good at it? That wouldn't happen at work, right? How can we be good at all these things if there's no guidance or training? And even a really simple thing for women and men is when you become a parent, you're just expected to know what to do. One of the most important jobs in the world. And there is no guidance. There are some books on Amazon, but there's no one really walks you through what to do. It's pretty terrifying, isn't it? And
right.
And that's just one example.
Yeah.
So how are men supposed to be good at showing emotion immediately if they haven't done it all their lives? Yeah, it's a great point. It won't change overnight, but it is the direction I think we need to go.
Help is just a click away with Shoreside Therapy's free 15-minute consultation. At Shoreside Therapies, they offer personalized therapy services that combine evidence-based techniques with genuine care and understanding. They provide various solutions to make the therapy process more accessible, including virtual appointments and assistance with insurance benefits. Their team of licensed therapists is dedicated to helping you build resilience and confidence while navigating life's challenges. Join Shoreside Therapies on your journey to finding inner peace and happiness. Go to shoresidetherapies.com for a free 15-minute consultation and discover the benefits of counseling. At Shoreside Therapies, again, shoresidetherapies.com, and schedule your free consultation right online. And there's also this challenge sometimes of what you were saying right there with how we can be good at something, right? When I'm working with men, that's the thing that does come up of, I know if I'm going to do this, and maybe it's work. I know if I go in that people admire me and I'm doing a great job and I have connections and I feel good about myself and I come home, I don't have that because I'm not doing this well. And that stops them from trying. Like, I think that there is this performance self-esteem that also men are brought up with. And when you're turning towards your partner and thinking, I got to be good at this, that's a limit. That's another construct. That's another thing saying, this is how you should be. And you can't do that here. It would make a lot of sense to maybe just avoid or isolate or shut down because it can feel like I'm not good enough, or that's something I hear all the time. It doesn't matter anyways, because whatever I do is not enough. Those are the common things I hear. And that's a really defeating place. And how does somebody move into a place of, okay, well, let's experiment with that, because that's really scary. So most people aren't going to just do that without any sort of guidance or real reason to do that.
I think feedback is the first thing that comes to mind. Over our holidays with the kids over in August, over a dinner, we asked for feedback on how we could become better parents. And it was the first time I've ever asked that question to my kids. Not very formally, but so semi-formally. We wanted to give us the 3 things that we could do better.
Yeah.
And we started with 3 things that we do well. It's constructive feedback as well. But it's amazing if you ask your 10-year-old, what could you do better? He felt delighted to be asked the question. And he thought about it. We didn't rush. He had time to come back later that night to give his views. And he gave his views. And it was emotional hearing give his views.
Yeah.
It was great. But my point about feedback, you can't get better at anything unless you ask for feedback or do some training or seek guidance or talk to your friends about what they do. And that comes back to like the key tenet of having a growth mindset. Pitstop isn't for someone who just is happy with the status quo.
Right.
We would like those people to become more growth mindset orientated, but it's much more likely to be for the man who is trying to advance himself and have a growth mindset and be promiscuous, do look for experiments and try to move forward.
Yeah. Yeah. And have that goal of more fulfilling and enriching life where there can be so many other dimensions to our life here. And so really somebody that's wanting that is probably somebody that's going to go seek out Pitstop. But I like that too of like, it would be nice if there was more people going in that direction. And how do we bridge that gap, which will take a lot more time, a lot more conversations, even just one-on-one conversations or family conversations like you're doing, right? Because not only are you getting feedback to become better, but you're also saying something to your kids in that moment, which is your input's valuable, you're important. And one of the top needs we have as humans is that we're important and that we have a role to be seen. But even having that conversation once, that's something they're going to take with them. And same with having those conversations about what are you actually experiencing in your life? What's difficult? What's challenging, right? What makes you feel scared, right? We just shy away in general from those questions.
I'm sure you ask those questions in your sessions all the time, but they're actually, when you're with people you trust or love and can ask the questions, it's really interesting conversation that generally follows. Mm-hmm. Really interesting. Instead of just the usual high-level conversation. It's really interesting. And it brings people together. It creates a stronger bond when you can have masks off type conversations and also have two ears and one mouth. I think what men might want to talk openly about various things, but they should be offering their male friends that they were there to listen. And that's just as important as talking. And we need to see more of that. But like to your point on that, we'll go back to growth mindset. I think the lady that created this term growth mindset estimated that about 40% of people globally have a propensity to have a growth mindset. So it is actually a large number. I'm not sure what the split is between men and women. That's something I should probably find out. In my view, why wouldn't you have a growth mindset? Because we're not here. Life is not a dress rehearsal. There's a book called 4,000 Weeks, which is all about that's how long we have, 4,000 weeks. I'm way past halfway. So like that shakes me going, crikey, why wouldn't I want to try and learn and adapt? I'm not saying, I hope your listeners, I don't come across the wrong way. I'm not learning every second of the day, right? I love sitting on a couch, chilling out, not trying to be Superman, but overall I am trying to make baby steps or atomic habits to improve.
Yeah. I think maybe where some of that isn't happening for people comes from a place of more in that despair, probably, or that feeling we were just talking about of when I'm trying, it doesn't matter. And so that's where I think the community comes into play and relationships come into play. Because if you're having more of those conversations and somebody says, yep, I was there. Yep, I've been through that experience. That's really difficult. And I remember feeling very similar. That person then can see that there is growth possible.
That's very powerful, yeah. One of the things we'd like to do on Pitstop, we have a public forum, but we'd like to do private forums, which could be thematic based. Say, for example, someone is experiencing hair loss or is about to get testosterone. You could hear from like-minded men about their journeys. I think that would provide comfort and men a lot, yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. We don't have to be going through this all alone.
No, there's 8 billion people out there, right? Yeah. I mean, we are all unique in our own way, but a lot of us face similar challenges. Yeah.
And one of the most amazing parts of the internet, I know we hear a lot of negative things and social media and apps and all of that, but it is that we do have this ability now for me to talk to you, right? And for people all around the world, maybe they all have this one thing that's showing up. They can all talk about it and feel not alone. If you go down the street and you say, this is my issue that's coming up, and someone said, I don't have that at all, you're going to feel very differently about it and feel very limited with that.
Yeah, and a great example of that is like a man who has erectile dysfunction issues don't go to their local GP to talk about it. Mm-hmm. They'd rather go to somewhere far away or do it online for sort of obvious reasons.
Yeah.
So technology and AI, if used appropriately, can help solve for some of these things.
Yeah. Emmett, where can people reach you? How do people get to Pitstop?
The website is takeapitstop.com. We're trying to encourage men to literally take a pit stop, take some time out. Even the fastest cars in the world take pit stops to recalibrate. So why shouldn't we all as men? So please reach out via the website, and there's links there to download the apps and take free trials of the apps. And if people would like to reach out to me direct, Kilduff is my name. I'm on LinkedIn, and please email me and I'll get back to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Emmett. It was great talking with you today.
Thanks, Laurie.
Thank you for joining us today on the Wisconsin Wellness Podcast. Remember, your well-being is a priority, and we're here to help support you every step of the way. If you've enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast for more inspiring content on health and wellness. You can also join our Facebook group to connect with Wisconsin wellness providers by clicking the link in our show notes. Take care of yourself and remember that your well-being is a journey, not a destination. We look forward to you joining us again next time on the Wisconsin Wellness Podcast. Until then, stay well and stay inspired.